beginning of a turning point, I think, in Tanner's psyche. Over the final couple hours of the game, the strange stuff that Tanner experiences becomes more and more frequent, with him eventually even questioning his own sanity, before finally coming to grips with the fact that yes, he is in a coma. And this awakening leads to some of the coolest stuff I've ever seen in a video game, because once he realizes that none of what's happening is real, he effectively turns this whole game into a lucid dream.
A few hours ago, I would have driven us both into a wall if there was a chance it would kill you.
Why'd you change your heart? Your balls drop off?
None of this is real. So what would be the point?
It's moments like this one that make me feel comfortable describing this game as the Metal Gear Solid 2 of racing games. This game is so insane at every single turn, from the premise to the actual story to the way the story wraps up, that to me it's one of the most interesting video games ever made by anyone, and I can think of no greater example of that than the very last mission. One of the final missions in the game grants you this incredible mind-over-matter superpower, the ability to pick up and psychically hurl all the other vehicles on the road at the game's main antagonist as you chase him down.
I'm throwing some goddamn cars too!
It's one of the craziest final sequences I've ever seen in any AAA video game, much less a licensed racing game.
Twice!
But the question remains, why was this game delisted from sale? Why can't you buy Driver San Francisco anymore? For years, with no word or even a heads up from Ubisoft that this was happening, fans have been left to speculate. Could it be for car licensing reasons, music licensing reasons, some other reason entirely? I actually reached out to Ubisoft to get to the bottom of this, and after a bit of prodding, I got the following answer from an Ubisoft representative. Quote, Driver San Francisco has been delisted for a few years. A number of factors go into evaluating whether to keep a game live, including community support. Now, I think it probably goes without saying that I don't love this answer. First off, yes, they're correct that it's been unavailable for a few years. From looking at different posts on the Steam forums and stuff, it looks like they quietly delisted the game back in 2016. Which is heartbreaking, by the way, because it means that the game was barely 5 years old when they yanked it from sale. And to put that into context a little bit, Driver San Francisco was a game that took over 5 years to make.
Those staff spent 5 years designing and bringing to life every aspect of the game.
What the fuck?
And for whatever reason, the development process wound up being longer than the window of time that the game was actually available to purchase. Personally, I'm just not thrilled with the idea that if you don't play a game within 5 years of its release, you've missed your chance and it's gone forever. Like, imagine trying to extend that logic to movies or television. Imagine what if 5 years after being released, you weren't able to watch any of these shows or movies anymore, and the publishers just shrugged it off with, yeah, sorry, we didn't feel like keeping them live. I also take issue with that wording, keep a game live. It's really odd, especially for a primarily single-player game like Driver SF. It implies that keeping a game on sale is something that you actively have to do, and it's not. Removing a game from every storefront it exists on is a choice. Not re-upping or renegotiating the licenses for a game that you released is a choice, and not valuing art enough to go to bat for it financially is a choice. In all honesty, I think there probably is a specific actual answer as to why Ubisoft delisted this game, and for whatever reason they're just unwilling to share it with us. And gun to my head, I would guess that yeah, it probably has something to do with negotiating the licenses for the vehicles or music in the game. But frankly, even if we knew the exact reason Ubisoft yanked the game, I just don't think there's an answer I'd be satisfied with. Maybe this is naive of me, but personally I think that when you ask a team of over 100 people to sink half a decade of their lives into creating a piece of art, you owe it to those people as the publisher of that art to do the necessary legwork every few years to just make sure that thing doesn't disappear. In my view, as the publisher and the entity responsible for whether or not this game lives or dies, you have an obligation to make sure that the thing that these people poured blood, sweat, and tears into doesn't just vanish one day, particularly not because their corporate overlords didn't feel like spending the money to keep it around. In my view, if you're not willing to go to bat for preservation of this art form, you're a bad steward of the medium and should maybe not be in the game-making business. Now, of course, Driver San Francisco is not the only game this has happened to. A really great website I found while researching this video, dedicated to this exact subject called delistedgames.com, says that currently there are over 700 titles that have suffered this same fate. And to be absolutely clear, we're not talking about old, rare, limited physical versions of games from the 80s. We're talking about modern digital games on digital storefronts. Games that, ostensibly, there should be infinite copies of that are no longer available to purchase, usually for dumb licensing reasons. The sad truth is that many times, contemporary digital games have far, far shorter average lifespans than the mainstream games of the 80s and 90s. I've been turning this situation over in my head for the past few months, trying to find a positive note to end it on. I don't love making negative videos. And if there's a silver lining to the statement that Ubisoft gave, it's the part at the end where they specifically mentioned that one of their main criteria when it comes to delisting a game is community support. I think it stands to reason that if there was suitable outcry from the community, Ubisoft might consider doing the due diligence necessary to put this cult classic back on sale. Games getting unlisted and later relisted is actually something that's happened before, and there's even a really good precedent for this. One of the precedents I would point to is Alan Wake. That's a game by a developer I really love, Remedy, that was delisted from digital storefronts back in 2017 and then relisted a year later in October 2018.
I really don't
How
want
is
to
this
waste any
possible? Well,
resources.
according to Remedy, their publisher, Microsoft, renegotiated the rights to the game's licensed music, enabling them to put the game back on sale. In other words, if a publisher cares enough, this is possible. This can happen. So, to demonstrate our support for this, here's my idea. I've put together a Change.org petition to show Ubisoft that yes, there is a big audience of people who care about this game. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think there is. If you, watching this video, want to play Driver San Francisco someday, or if you just want to support interesting games like this one being preserved for the future, please take a couple seconds and sign this petition. There's no guarantee it'll do anything, but the more people sign it, the better our chances become. And for those of you who think petitions never change anything, the last time we endorsed a petition on this channel, we got Reggie a brand new Herman Miller Aeron chair, so checkmate. On the other hand, maybe it's fitting and even a little poetic that this weird, surreal game that felt like it never should have existed now barely does. The entire duration of Driver San Francisco, Tanner remains in a coma, and now, in a way, the game itself is too. Completely gone from every digital storefront and now only available through resold old Uplay keys and physical copies that there are a finite number of, Driver San Francisco is sort of permanently trapped between life and death, and there's something a little romantic about that. But yeah, dude, Driver San Francisco just rules. It's a really, really special game, one that I wish more people had the opportunity to play, and if you'd sign this petition and or share this video with someone you think might find this game interesting or want to play it themselves, that would mean a lot to me. But in the meantime, thank you for watching this video, and thank you for subscribing to this channel, and yeah, I'll see you next time.
Eventually he will die. This is like a really boring version of basketball.
Most 3D character-driven video games can be pretty easily placed into one of two categories, either first-person or third-person. In a first-person game, you see the game world through the actual eyes of the player character as though you were that character, and in a third-person game, you see the player character from the outside, often from behind their back or from a fixed isometric perspective. But the existence of these two perspectives begs a question. If this is what a first-person game looks like, and this is what a third-person video game looks like, what exactly would second person look like? Now, I'm not the first person to wonder about this. The question of whether or not a second person shooter could actually exist is one that has plagued video game message boards just about as long as the internet has existed. It's also served as the premise for some pretty good comedy sketches over the years, like this one from Mega64.
Introducing the world's first second-person shooter.
And this one from The Onion.
To enter second-person shooter mode, you just simply adjust the narrative slider from first to second.
You are walking down a long corridor. Suddenly, a Nazi leaps out from around a doorway and unleashes a hail of machine gun fire in your direction.
But to help us actually figure out what a second-person game would really be, I think it would be helpful to look at this grammatically. In written language, the term first person denotes any writing where the point of view uses phrases like I or my to tell a story from the perspective of the protagonist. Third person writing, on the other hand, uses third person pronouns, for example, he went this way, she went that way, etc., to talk about characters from an outside perspective. Now, second person writing does exist, but it's kind of a weird one. In second person, the primary pronoun used is you. You do this, you go there, etc. The second person is actually a lot less common in narrative writing, and is actually something you're more likely to encounter in, say, a list of instructions or a choose-your-own-adventure book. Now, the analogous video game camera perspectives for first and third person writing are obvious, but what about for second person? We know what an I game looks like, and we know what a he game looks like, but what about a you game? Strangely enough, I actually found the answer to this before I even came up with a question, and believe it or not, it came to me courtesy of a game you may have heard me talk about once before, and that game is Driver San Francisco. See, for all the interesting missions in Driver San Francisco, and there are plenty of them, there's one mission in particular that I swear to God I think about all the time. The mission in question is called The Target, and it's the final mission of Chapter 6 of the game. In the game, you play as a cop named John Tanner, who, for reasons I won't get into here, basically has a superpower that allows you to take over the bodies of any other driver and has begun using that superpower to foil a possible terror plot from a gangster named Jericho. Over the course of the game, Tanner decides that the best way to unravel Jericho's plans is to do it from the inside, and in order to do that, Tanner takes over the body of a low-level henchman named Ordell and uses his driving skills to help move Ordell up the ranks. The final mission in this story arc sees you inhabiting Ordell's body one last time to complete a major assignment from his boss Layla, who is this international assassin and Jericho's second-in-command. Tanner's plan? Warp into Ordell's body and, without arousing suspicion, drive Layla and Ordell directly into police custody. Now the mission begins as normal with Tanner and his partner Jones driving their iconic orange Dodge Challenger, and soon enough you warp into Ordell's body with Layla in the passenger seat where she gives you some clarity on your mission.
Ordell, I need nothing but your best today.
What's going down?
Jericho's got a problem he wants fixed. Get me to the target and I'll fix it.
Fuck off.
So you drive to the destination she's given you, closing in on your target, and as you get close, this happens.
Slow down. We should acquire the target anytime now. The yellow Dodge, up ahead.
Fuck.
Stay close, but don't be obvious.
That's my car.
What? That's the cop that's been getting in our way.
Do we follow him to the target?
He is the target.
It's you. You've been assigned to kill you. Now, after that cutscene ends, you are back in Ordell's body in the first person with Layla sitting to your right. But then, you press the throttle to accelerate, and the car in front of you moves. You steer to the left and to the right, and the car in front of you moves to the left and then to the right. And then quickly, it sinks in that the car you're controlling is actually the car you're following. Your perspective as the player is entirely separate from what you're controlling as the player. In other words, you're pursuing you. Now, as you can see, the car that you're sitting in is moving too, but crucially, you're not the one who's controlling that car. The car you're sitting in is moving automatically, seemingly operated by an AI-controlled driver who's tailing the car you're actually controlling. It's basically like a chase mission in any other video game, just like you've seen countless other times, except for this time, it's flipped on its head. This time, you're the one being followed while simultaneously seeing it all unfold from the perspective of the car doing the following. And while it's hard for me to guess how well this comes across on video, all these elements combine to make something that is very, very odd to play. There's something shocking and disorienting about seeing a first-person perspective on your screen, but also not controlling that perspective while remotely operating the car that you're tailing. It's the closest a video game has ever gotten to feeling like a true out-of-body experience, and it's an experience that has stuck with me ever since I first played this game back in 2011. Now, when I first played Driver San Francisco 8 years ago, I kind of just played through this mission once, start to finish, marveling at the unique perspective that this mission granted you, but then moving on to the rest of the game. But I've always felt like if I ever came back to this game, I'd want to pick this mission apart and see what makes it tick, and that's part of what I hope to accomplish with this video. See, as cool as this mission is, it's also pretty linear. The whole thing takes place with you driving down this completely locked down race course with no exits or detours, pretty much just a straight shot to the exit. I've always assumed that the developer Reflections designed the mission this way due to the technological limitations of this weird second-person camera that they built just for this mission. Perhaps there was no way for them to get this camera to behave properly in the actual open world with all these various streets, elevations, and alleyways you could dip into, not to mention the other street traffic. And on top of that, they built this mission with a pretty strict countdown timer, forcing you to hit the checkpoints in rapid succession, something that I always assumed was placed there to keep you from ever veering too far off the path and breaking the game somehow. Still, I've always wondered about the actual limitations of this mission, and I knew that this time around I wanted to test out whether or not there was any way to escape. So before finishing the mission, I paused, started it over, and then this time, instead of starting the race as intended, I swung the car into a 180, driving the car backwards in the wrong direction. Now, when I do this, the AI driver immediately begins panicking, rapidly spinning the steering wheel, trying desperately to keep my car visible in frame, and then eventually it turns around 180 degrees to reveal what looks like the entire open world of Driver San Francisco, seemingly 100% accessible to the player. Now, I drove away from the racetrack and began exploring, and I kept bracing myself to hit some kind of invisible wall or failure state for going off course, but it never happened. It all actually worked. I merged into traffic and the second-person camera followed me.